for this session, which is the last session of the day on day 3 of our event. So we hope that hopefully this isn't the first session you're joining, but if it is, welcome. We do have a lot more planned for Thursday and Friday as well. But for today, we're talking all about how to use video to enhance internal communication in a global organization. And this is going to be a half-an-hour session, but we're going to save sort of 5 to 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. So as usual, if you can use the question box on your GoToWebinar panel to add those questions in, you can be adding them as we're talking. We'll come to them at the end to answer. This is also being recorded, so if you have to drop off for any reason, then that's no problem. You'll get the recording probably tomorrow. And yeah, if you wanted to catch up on anything as well, you can revisit all the sections in there too. So some introductions. My name is Naomi. I'm the Content Marketing Manager here at Sparkle, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. And I am very excited to be joined by Dave, who is Director of Strategy and Innovation at CESO, which is an international voluntary service organization matching sort of experience and expertise with projects and communities around the world to help them flourish. I'm sure Dave will do a much better job of introducing that than me, but that is a brief intro. So let's get into it. So kind of my first question for you, Dave, is exactly that intro. So can you tell us a bit about how you're using video for internal communication at CESO?
Absolutely. Maybe I'll just give you a little bit more color about the organization so you have some context. To be honest, I could show a video that would actually describe this to kind of prove the point, but it'll just be me this time around. So as Naomi said, we're a Canadian-based not-for-profit organization with a global presence. Our mission is really embodied in our tagline, which is stronger economies for better lives. So for over 50 years now, we've been working with small and medium business and the supporting government infrastructure around the world, and actually over 125 developing countries, and equally importantly, here in Canada with Indigenous communities. As Naomi mentioned, our support is actually through volunteers. These are highly skilled volunteers, typically have 20 plus years of experience. So we deploy them around the world to support these small and medium businesses, typically in assignments that last anywhere from a week to 6 weeks, but sometimes longer. We work in a broad range of industries, a big focus in tourism and hospitality and agribusiness, and the support we provide is across sort of all organizational functions: marketing, finance, human resources, operations, sort of you name it, we're there to help our people. So from a context for internal communications, we have about 90 staff around the world, but we also have a roster of over 1,500 volunteers. So a significant amount of communication required with a global footprint. So to sort of now give you some insight in terms of our use for video. So we use video, excuse me, in a variety of different areas, all the way from when we actually onboard and train our staff and volunteers. So these are sometimes off-the-shelf videos about sort of code of conduct ethics. We have some programs on Indigenous awareness. We also use video to sort of reinforce to our volunteers sort of the impact that our assignments are having. So that's important, not just to sort of keep them interested and retain them on our roster, but it also helps recruit other volunteers. So that's kind of a marketing element. And the last portion of it, which is a big part of the project we're recently wrapping up with Sparkle, is sort of education to help explain sort of how this whole volunteer journey works, from how you actually find assignment through to ultimately when you come back home and how do you actually finish things off. So whether that's expense reports or any of those details, just to explain the entire journey. So in summary, we use video across the board, and it's sort of one of our key weaponry of internal communications.
Perfect. That was a 10 out of 10 intro compared to mine. But I think, as you said, it's just so interesting to hear, even in that brief snapshot, that you're using video in so many different ways at different points in like an employee life cycle and a volunteer life cycle. So many different touch points video can help with. And I think to kind of reinforce this, we wanted to just show you a bit of the video that our Sparkle studio team have been working on with Dave and his team to help communicate some of these changes. So I'll just play a little bit of that for you now.
To help you find the right assignment at the right time, we've enhanced CESO's recruitment process to better match assignments and advisors. This includes the introduction of common terminology across volunteers and assignments, which identify the required skill sets and experience using roles, industry sector, and client experience, such as a gender equality advisor assisting a natural resources management department, a pastry chef helping a small hospitality business, or an Indigenous governance advisor training a not-for-profit in economic development. Given the breadth and depth of CESO advisors' expertise, in the past, it could be time-consuming to find assignments of interest. Now, you can quickly find possible assignment matches based on the roles and industry experience you add to your MyCESO profile. These possible matches are color-coded as red for no, yellow for maybe, and green for yes. This will save you time to review targeted assignments in detail and apply to those of most interest. To make your search even easier, assignments of interest can now be automatically sent via
So hopefully that gave you a little flavor of kind of how video is being used in that particular setting. But I wanted to ask you, Dave, kind of what made you choose a video to communicate these changes over, say, just a standard presentation or even just writing it in an email?
Good question. So the context of that video is all about a new volunteer web portal that we're launching that improves our ability to match volunteers with assignments. So we were looking for something that was really engaging, that would actually sort of pique our volunteers' interest, draw them into this portal, explain this sort of matching concept at a relatively high level, excuse me, but also give enough detail as the video progresses that ultimately when they log on to the portal, they already know how it works. So we actually launched a prototype portal earlier in the year. Because we weren't ready to produce videos, we wrote manuals, short guides. Knowing that probably people wouldn't read them, we confirmed that. So we kind of said, unfortunately, or the reality is people don't read. So we knew that video would actually be the key medium to get across that point. And that's really was the genesis of the project. So it's all about sort of creating engaging content that's easily digestible and has some element of entertainment as well.
Perfect. And how, there we go. How did you kind of start planning out those videos to ensure that your message was clear and you were getting across all that information that you didn't want people to miss that was crucial to the project?
Good point. This was actually one of 6 videos that we produced, and actually both in English and French, our 2 national languages here, so 12 videos in total. So it was a lot of content. Really started off with sort of a cross-functional sort of brainstorming session out of the gate to sort of go through sort of clarifying who the audience was, what the specific objectives were, kind of thinking about content. Everyone was kind of emptying their pockets of things that they thought were appropriate to say. Then we sort of did some initial high-level storyboarding just to get an idea of how we would convey this, knowing that that would be done by professionals down the road, but it kind of helped link the visual imagery to the scripts. So then we actually had some draft scripts created. We then consolidated them internally and sort of went through another round of editing just to make sure that terminology was consistent, sort of the tone and the messaging was all correct. And then in parallel with that, we were shopping for a supplier to help us out. And I would say, and actually I can thank directly Naomi, Sparkle played a huge strength in terms of further editing our copy. Given their expertise in explainer videos, they kind of took what were relatively long scripts and said, you really need to tighten these up. So we worked very closely with Sparkle to really improve the content, sort of sort the wheat from the chaff and make sure that they were really delivering not just verbally, but because Sparkle had an idea of the visual imagery, they sort of helped us tighten up the script. So it was basically a brainstorming, lots of editing, bringing those together, and then using professionals to sort of get us across the finish line.
Very much appreciating the shout out there, Dave. I'll pay you later. But yeah, I think for us working with you was so easy because you had already done all of that prep work internally about knowing exactly what you wanted to get across, and you'd got all the people involved that had to be involved so that you weren't kind of having to rewind and dip into other like resources and people's knowledge to get the project going. You'd already done all of that work, which I think is so important to flag if you are thinking about creating videos like this. You don't want to get through halfway through and think, oh, we missed these key points. You want to flesh it all out in the beginning.
But the one thing I will, the one thing I will add to that, which made for a longer project, but I think a better project, we were actually building this portal in parallel with doing the sort of the promotional wear, which can make it more difficult, but ultimately I kind of consider any training material or promotional material sort of to be intrinsic with the service or product. So it doesn't make sense to wait until the end. And in fact, there were a number of things we kind of discovered through creating the explainer video that actually built us a better portal. So we actually did it in parallel, which stretched the project out a little bit, but I think ultimately it improved the videos and ultimately it improved the portal as well.
Perfect. So some sort of learnings as you go as well as a little bonus.
Absolutely.
So once you'd kind of nailed the content and the scripts and what was actually going to be in the videos, how did you start thinking about the styling for them? Because obviously we saw in that example it was quite a specific style. So kind of what drew you to that and what was the process like?
Great question. So the actual early genesis of the project was, I was thinking, okay, I think video would fit the bill for this. I went on the web and actually found Video Scribe, and I created my own based on sort of the free trial version, and sort of shopped that around internally and said, I think this would be an intriguing way to get this content across. What do you think? People liked the overall approach, but they said, I think we're looking for something that sort of better fits our look and feel. So I then looked around not just our own content, but at other videos. And when we engaged Sparkle, I said, here's a particular video I like, and here's the reasons I like it. I had looked at their show reel and said, I like this, I like that. Would you be open to sort of combining multiple styles? And that's exactly what Sparkle did and why it was a pleasure working with your team. You were open to new ideas, and ultimately we came up with sort of a new foundational look and feel for explainer videos going forward, which we'll use in the future. Previously, we'd done an explainer video like maybe 4 or 5 years ago. To be honest, if you took the CESO logo away, it would look like any other explainer video. You wouldn't know it was ours. Whereas with the work that we've done with Sparkle, now we have something that truly fits into our promotional portfolio. It's got the same look and feel. You didn't see a lot of it, but there's a lot of actually photos and sort of reality to what we're doing. So ultimately, we sort of started with sort of an off-the-shelf approach and then ultimately sort of iterated to something that was highly customized and just fits us like a glove.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's a really important point, that when someone watches that video, you want them to instantly recognize it as you. And I think where you're saying developing your own style, it might be taking bits you like of other things, but then always putting your own stamp on it at the end is a really important part and something not to be overlooked, I guess, when you're trying to get these out probably on a time crunch.
Absolutely.
Definitely. So let's move on to the next question, which was, so we know these videos were about communicating some changes. They were obviously positive changes to your portal that was going to help people find assignments easier, but as with any change, we know there can be a little bit of resistance sometimes when people are kind of set in their ways of doing things. So were you mindful of that when you were creating the videos and how to approach the change in a positive way?
Absolutely. So there's a fair amount of kind of sales within the presentation, like that was quite deliberate, but it's not in your face and overt, but if you go through the script we co-developed, it's all about the benefit that the volunteers will gain from this. So kind of the you factor was very important to us. So I would say in developing the content, we were extremely mindful of not just that we were introducing a portal, but really focusing on like, so what, who cares? Let's make sure that the volunteer knows not only what they're going to get out of it, but equally so how it'll help the volunteers and CESO improve the impact of our assignments as well. So huge focus on sort of making that message as tight as possible. And you didn't see the whole video, it's about 2 minutes or so, but it goes from a very high level concept of these matching of cards all the way down to, in essence, how the portal works. So it was amazing how we were able to get that much content in such a short clip, but it's done very elegantly, and we've had very favorable feedback about it.
Awesome. I think that is key, isn't it? Is treating almost your colleagues and people in your wider environment almost as customers as well, because we forget that they also need to be brought in because they're not living what you're seeing every day. They still need to be reminded why it's important. So you can't almost have to treat it, like you said, as a sort of promotional video because you need that buy-in. So I think anyone who's in this position listening probably can relate to that as a challenge.
The other thing I should have mentioned to sort of build on that is during the scripting process, we actually tested the scripts against some volunteers. So we actually went through it with them to figure out what they understood, what they didn't, and sort of doing some iterative user testing was really helpful as well.
That's a really great tip. Did you find that it changed much, or you were kind of right to begin with, just out of curiosity?
I mean, I would say we were pretty close, but there were a couple of areas that we found out was probably more detail than required, and maybe one area that we needed to sort of bolster it a little bit. So I'd say we're probably 90% there, but that 10% actually makes a huge difference.
Yeah, that's a great tip to add in, I think, for anyone listening. Going through the same thing. You've kind of touched on it already that you've had some positive feedback, but just to go into this in a bit more detail about the results you've had from sharing the videos. I know it's still relatively early days in launching this project, but yeah, any insights you can share?
Sure. I mean, the first one, we actually had an internal premiere with our board, and we actually got a round of applause, which doesn't normally happen at board meetings. So that was really positive. And we've actually shown it internally and got similar type of feedback. And it was officially launched at a virtual town hall meeting to our volunteers a couple of weeks ago. And I'm just getting a stream of positive feedback from a number of volunteers that I know well, and also some of the volunteers that actually played a part in creating the portal, saying, this is really cool to see, like, not only did I help build it, but I'm very impressed with how you're actually promoting it and getting it out there. So I would say the feedback has been extremely strong. I'm very happy with it.
That's so nice to hear those different perspectives, because yeah, you don't even think about, like you said, the people involved who are actually seeing it come to life. It's like a showcase of their work as well.
Exactly.
And I think even in you describing how you kind of presented the video is also a bit of a masterclass for anyone else thinking of bringing those videos to their business. I think choosing those key points where you're going to have a lot of eyes on it to launch it so that it has the chance to be as successful as you hope, I think is a really important point.
Exactly. And in that town hall, it was a bit of a teaser, sort of a coming to a theater near you type of approach. So it got people interested, which we then were able to follow up as we continued to deploy. So it was really engaging content that got people interested, which then allowed us to follow up with sort of more in-depth content and other means.
Nice. And so a bit of a broader question, but for those people joining who might be thinking about doing a project similar to yours or have done it before and are wondering how to improve, what advice would you give people wanting to use video for internal comms, say on a similar project?
So just to kind of reinforce some of the things I mentioned earlier, I think, again, like any type of promotional element, like really clarifying who your audience is and what your objectives are. Because if you don't know truly who you're speaking to and what sort of tone or terminology or voice they're looking for, it's going to fall flat. And then ultimately, particularly with explainer videos, when they do need to be as short and sweet as possible, making sure you have kind of a tangible call to action or objectives to meet that you can then go back to the content and say, okay, is this actually moving that ball forward or not? So again, just sort of simple marketing 101, know your audience, know your objectives, and then you can build your content. Because the 5 of the videos were actually describing the details of our volunteer journey from finding assignments all the way to returning home, there was actually a lot of input from multiple groups within our team. So making sure that you got the right people at the table to actually sort of tell you what they'd like to present, making sure that you're all sort of working at the right level of detail and everyone's kind of bought into the overall plan. And then ultimately you have to get the point of saying, like, thanks for the content, we're now going to take it and polish it. Because another tip I'd say is, one of the problems with promotion is everyone's an expert. Everyone knows the color palette they like, everyone knows the music they like, and there's a point where you have to say, thanks for your feedback. We're actually engaging professionals here, and we'll do the right thing based on meeting the audience and objectives. So there's a point where being open to all input and getting the content on the table, but then based on previous experience, you kind of have to shrink that into a core group that sort of takes the ball across the goal line.
Definitely. I feel like that's one of those like tough but essential points where you just have to say, this is the cutoff, no more changes, we're running with this. Perfect. So final question before we jump into the Q&A, because I can see we have had some questions come through already. Just out of interest, I guess, do you have any future video plans that you can share with us? I think just to give people ideas, again, of different ways they can be using video.
Sure. I mean, I can't mention specifics, but what I can say is we're just in the midst of launching a new 7-year project across the globe. It involves opening offices in multiple new countries. So we're going to be using video as a vehicle to sort of grow our new programming. We have some new methodologies we're introducing, so video will be a cornerstone of that. We're also growing our program with Indigenous communities in Canada. So video, both in terms of the education and training in terms of Indigenous awareness, will be an important element of that. So definitely watch this space. There'll be more videos to come.
Perfect. So thank you so much to Dave for sharing your journey and your insights with us. We now have a bit of time for Q&A. So if you haven't already put your questions in the question box, you can put them in now. I will just have a quick look through. So we've had a question from Bill, who firstly says, nice job, David. He's a fellow Canadian as well, so giving a little shout out. He says, he's basically asking about how you managed the challenge of creating a video in English and French, I guess with potentially one language being longer than the other, throwing out timings and potential changes. So could you give us any insight on how that worked?
Sure. I mean, the first off was I went through a process to actually find a vendor, and that was a key requirement. Have you worked in multilingual environments before? So that was a key checkpoint, which Sparkle had done, including in Canada. And for those that may not know, there's a difference between French Canadian French and Parisian French and Senegalese French. So Sparkle had actually worked in Canada with French, so that was a comfort as well. We talked about what was the best approach for translation, and it turned out we ended up using our internal translation expertise, because they already knew our terminology, they knew kind of the nuances of our language. Invariably, French, like many other languages, can be a little bit longer when you get to the script, so there are issues with timing, but fortunately Sparkle had the expertise that could sort of rejig the timing of the video itself to make sure everything fit. And we also had a number of people reviewing that made sure that the content made sense in both languages. So I would say it's something it's a little bit time consuming, and you have to be very sharp on the details, but it wasn't a major obstacle.
Cool. Yeah, I think as Dave said, if that is something you're interested in getting help with, we can definitely support. And for clarity, so when we're talking about Sparkle Studio, we're talking about our bespoke video agency. So where we're obviously taking our experience of developing and building VideoScribe, but helping organizations like CESO tell their story with extra custom animations and a kind of custom story to bring their information to life. So in some cases, I'm saying this just because I can see we've had a couple of other questions about how VideoScribe is linked, but I think, as Dave said, VideoScribe is often a sort of a gateway into more developed custom videos, because you kind of figure out what you like and get started on your own, maybe with a free trial, and then want some extra help from our dedicated animators and script writers and things like that to help you take it to the next level. So hopefully that explains.
Sorry, one last point I should have mentioned. So we used our own internal translation resource, but actually Sparkle found the voiceover talent for us. So they gave us multiple options. We had to listen to them, decided which was the best voice, and it worked out very well.
Perfect. We've also had just a couple of questions about how you basically got buy-in internally for developing this project. So how did you kind of convince whoever you needed to convince that this was a good idea and you should spend the money on it internally?
So I would say that wasn't necessarily easy, because some people just think that education happens by magic and you don't need to resource it. But I made the point of, we've invested a significant amount of resource, both time and people, on the portal itself. And if ultimately we don't get the adoption that we're looking for, then it wasn't a very good investment. So as part of the project budget, I said, this is critical training and promotional content. This line item is critical to the project. And fortunately, our CEO, who is very enlightened, is very strong on communication. She said, I get it. Don't know exactly what you're cooking up, but I trust you, and I approve that resource.
Perfect. That is always, we know, a difficult thing, but yeah, as you said, luckily you already had someone who was on board with the idea of video, so we hope that if that's you as well, it's going to be an easier road to get your videos in. I am conscious of time and wanting to finish on past, so if you have got any meetings afterwards, you can get onto them. Any questions that we haven't answered online, we will pick up afterwards. And if you have anything extra that you wanted to ask, you can contact myself at marketing@sparkle.com for anything Sparkle Studio, VideoScribe, anything related. If you have any specific questions for Dave about how he's managed the project or any advice and things, I have got his email address on there if you wanted to contact him. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us for today's session. And thank you again to Dave for taking the time to talk us through how things worked at CESO and the results you've seen and all that extra detail. I think it's been really beneficial for everyone who's joined. So wherever you are in the world, we hope you have a great rest of your day. We know everyone's all over, so have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you on another webinar soon. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for your time.